Jumping into Silo, Season 2, Episode 1, The Engineer. So this episode-by-episode review is going to be a little bit different than some of the others I've done because we're going to still be trying to solve some of the mysteries and themes of the Silo using media literacy each episode as we go along. And because of that, I'm going to break it down into the common refrain from the Silo. We do not know why we're here. We do not know who built the Silo. We don't know why everything outside the Silo is the way it is. We don't know when it will be safe to go outside, but we know today is not that day. And I'm going to be combining the we don't know when it will be safe to go outside with today is not that day, just for simplicity's sake. Starting with we don't know why we are here. On a micro level, we know Jules is in the abandoned silo because she was forced out of the original silo and needs to get someplace before her suit breaches. And why Jules chose this silo versus any of the others is because of its right next door proximity and because she did see that there was a way to get into it, mostly due to the mass exodus of the people beforehand. We do meet one single sole survivor in the dead silo. It is an open question if there are other survivors with him, but as far as this one character goes, we really don't know why he's here, specifically why he's in this one locked bunker room within the silo. If he is alone, there's no reason for him to have locked himself in this vault. And even if he's not alone, I imagine he can't have locked himself in the vault forever because I don't know how he's getting food or water or using any amenities. We can theorize that this is the server room and that perhaps he's in some kind of communication with the founders. Why he wouldn't just lock this room up entirely and go about his day as normal, still not really clear. Make me ask questions like whether or not each one of these silos is holding a piece of some kind of knowledge in their server room, so each one of them has to remain active and preserve the piece they have. And on a macro level, this episode provides us some information about the larger societies of the silos. We see that this silo had a rebellion and their rebels were successful. Don't exactly know what kind of rebellion happened in the original silo. There's conflicting stories there. One where the rebels wanted to go outside just like these rebels did, and another where the rebels just wanted to remember the before times. And until we get more clarification on that point, I'm skeptical of both stories because neither fully explain anything. The fact that the Carmody cleaning caused so much issue in the original silo, and something sort of like that must have released in this abandoned silo to make them think they're lying about the outside. When that information can spread quickly enough that they can form a rebellion, that this leads to the silo's destruction. It shows us that the question, why are we in the silo, is really important to these residents. And it seems like it's combined with this innate, powerful pull to go back outside. Because the second there's any indication that they might be able to go back outside, they seem to jump on that. That's interesting in several levels, right? Because it says to me that they really distrust authority. Any kind of conflicting proof from what the main story is immediately believed. They don't do any testing, any further knowledge keeping, and it does make me wonder why the silo is not being honest with them, because it seems like if they were more transparent, the people would be more likely to believe that it's really not safe outside, especially if they could see what it was once like out there versus what it's like out there now. We do not know who built the silo. So getting to see an interior of another silo is quite illuminating because the layout, the interior design, the symbols carved into the walls, the view screen, the cafeteria, an exact mirror of what we saw in the original silo. So we know whoever designed and outfitted these areas was the same person and made it completely uniform across all of the silos. The other thing interesting about this is we know before they went into the silos, technology is more advanced than what we see within the silo. For example, the general population doesn't know about video recorders, but there was a video recorder in the before times that was common use. So that means there was an intentional decision to make all of the technology retro when outfitting these silos, because there are cameras behind the mirrors in the abandoned silo as well as our original silo. Observation was a key goal of whoever built these silos. It does make me question the original purpose of the silo. Were all these things supposed to be detention centers or experiments and then they were transformed into shelters? Did they have a good reason to feel like they needed to always be watching the survivors? The government that we see between the two silos is exactly the same with the sheriff, judicial, and IT. And while the original silo still had a working government and this other silo was in the middle of a rebellion and collapse sort of phase, it is interesting to see that the rabble rouser or the canary in the coal mine seems to always be the sheriff. Holston and Jules, both as sheriff, shake things up, threaten the order of their original silo. And in this other silo, it's the sheriff who's leading the rebellion. It seems like when engineering and the sheriff Sheriff become like an alliance, then they're able to be victorious over Judicial and IT. I'm wondering if we're going to see something similar to that in our original silo. So like the more we get into it, the more I'm really curious about what the people in Judicial and in IT know about the founders, where they're getting the directives from, whether or not they're able to communicate between silos, whether or not they have a link to the founders, or we're more curious about who's ruling the silos now versus who originally created them and what those intentions were. One last thing that sort of is like popping my mind for curiosity is why don't these silos have spacesuits? The equipment they use to send people outside, they need to use like that heat tape to seal. The suit themselves is very flimsy, there's very minimal oxygen tank, and we have heavy duty suits that would exist in like a zero atmosphere environment. So you think if a big group of people created the silos, which all indications point to that, they would have outfitted them with appropriate equipment to go outside and take samples and do all that kind of stuff, which would be astronaut equipment. If you know you're in the middle of a huge catastrophe and going in and out is going to be dangerous, why even take the risk with all like these flimsy suits that have a bunch of points of failure on them? And because so much of the creation of these silos seems to be very intentional and like designed around control and secrecy, it does make me wonder whether or not we would ever be able to go outside, or like if the plan was always to contain people in the silos. We don't know why everything outside is the way it is. This is still true, and it's becoming a more and more pressing question for me all the time. My original theory was the lack of oxygen is what ended up suffocating anyone who went outside, but after seeing everybody rush out from the mass rebellion and make it so far, also after seeing their corpses when Jules is walking by, I have to wonder if it's something else. Because the corpses feel like they're in a very strong state of decay, and there's like all these holes and ragged tears in the clothing. What could even be doing that? Is there like a microbiome that's alive and well? Especially as quickly as it happens, we know there's that sole survivor in the vault. We do not know when it will be safe to go outside. Still very true. We can definitely 100% affirm it's not safe to go out right now, and that they don't have appropriate PPE to really execute this well. Less and less sure that it was ever a goal or an intention to return to outside. A couple miscellaneous notes I'm holding on to for the show. The dead silo has a suspicious amount of power for a flooded generator. The fact that we enter the main cafeteria, the view screen is still up, the day and night cycle seems to be working in the main corridors of the silo. Some of the power is on in agriculture. It looks like Judicial has full power. What's going on? I thought the generator provided all of that, and the generator is heavily flooded, like floors and floors and floors of the silo are gone. This is very different from in the original silo, where in episode 3 they lost all power when they turned that generator off, and they were talking about how it was not survivable if they couldn't get the generator back up and working. Apparently it is survivable. Also, I'm assuming they intentionally flooded the generator to get outside, because if it was like a natural disaster it would have also impacted our original silo, and there was no hint of flooding over there. That is a lot of water. Where did all that water come from, and why is it all like stuck in the silo? Why hasn't it drained out or anything? I could be thinking about an element the show doesn't intend to tackle. The whole premise feels very suspicious the way it's laid out right now. When we're in those rebellion scenes, the sheriff asks,
"Why won't he open the door?"
to his wife, and she says
They told him not to.
a couple obvious questions there. Which door? The door to the outside? The door to the Judicial or IT vault? Door that's in the drill room? Did these people even know about the drill room? And then who is the they that told this guy not to open the door? Is it the same people that Bernard in the original silo is talking to? Is this like an actual communication that's happening, or are they following some kind of blueprint that was handed down from like the lineage of the founders? Or maybe is there like an AI in charge? I'm just speculating and throwing out things. I really don't know. And lastly, in that rebellion scene, they ruin the whole silo and everybody dies because Judicial wouldn't let them go outside, presumably. Why not just let the people who want to go outside like they do in the original silo? Was it just that there were too many people who wanted to go outside? Does this particular silo have no suits to let them out in? What was going on with this rebellion situation? I'm a lot less interested in Jules as a character within her own flashbacks, mostly because like it didn't really give us any information we didn't already know about her, and I feel like as an origin story it's repetitive and monotonous, but I am paying close attention to Walker and Shirley in these flashbacks. I think they're going to be two of the main catalysts in the original silo when we go back to them. We learn that Shirley and her family grew up in the Down Deep, so she's not like a prisoner that was sent there, which means I'm still waiting to figure out why Judicial has a file on her. And we also learn that Shirley knows about the drill, as does it seems like everyone in the engineering department, as they used to wander there as kids. I know Jules had mentioned offhand that everyone knew about it, but the fact that kids like explore there regularly means the camp that George made down there was sort of public knowledge, and like anyone could stumble upon those relics at any time. And then lastly, there were a couple of cool visual storytelling elements in like the graffiti in the destroyed silo's walls. When we open, we get to see like a founder's mural that's been defaced. When Jules wanders into the abandoned silo, there's the word lies on the big cafeteria screen, which is kind of ironic because the view from the cafeteria is not a lie. And this is the second time the show has brought up the majority of people in the silo believe authority is lying to them and might specifically be lying to them about going outside. So even though I'm not 100% sure why we keep hammering this point because it's repetition, I'm keeping it in the hat with a little note on it. And it's also interesting because the word lie is the opposite of truth, and truth is the magic word from season 1. Speaking of which, we do get one scene where Jules is exploring this abandoned silo and we get her facial expression, and the wall in the background has truth scrawled above her head, which is sort of like reaffirming that Jules is seeking the truth in season 2 and that truth is going to be her main goal for discovery and innovation going forward. There's a bunch of other little like graffiti notes that you can catch here and there and like pause to look at throughout this first episode. I can't think of like any specific one that I really want to call it at this moment, but it might be something for me to rewatch before we get further into the season. While this episode starts off with a lot of energy and intrigue with the decimated silo's rebellion, it starts to become really slow and monotonous very early on. I like watching Jules explore the outside world. I liked her exploring the abandoned silo and putting things together. I think we could have used less of her problem solving trying to get across the way to Judicial, made that a little easier for her, and I could have done entirely without all the flashbacks to the original silo and childhood time. I think that really messed up pacing and took away from like our time we could have been exploring this world. Also, I think it was a mistake on Apple's part not to release 2 episodes like they did for the original season 1. Season 1 had a much stronger episode 1 and they still gave us both episodes for a full loop on the sheriff. And here in season 2, where we're going to be exploring both this abandoned silo and our original silo, it would have been nice if we had an entry point to both of those through an episode 1 with Jules and an episode 2 back at the original silo. But that's just like my thoughts on storytelling and balancing all of that out. Generally speaking, I'm still pretty excited. I still see a lot of promise. This is a great little mystery story. But talk to me. What are your predictions for season 2 of The Silo? Let me know in those comments down below. And if you got this far in and you don't have anything else to add, leave me like a tool emoji. And as always, keep reading.